The views and opinions expressed on this program are not those of Norfolk State University or WNSB-FM. Thank you for listening.
It's Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
Hi, everybody. I'm Benita Adams, and today on Hampton Roads Voices, we're going to talk about surviving R. Kelly and the mindset of an abused person. Were there signs that indicated abuse? Did R. Kelly's background open the door for his behavior? And what is the mindset of abused people, and what makes them stay in destructive and abusive relationships? We'll talk to local experts and survivors, and we definitely want to hear from you. Hampton Roads Voices, timely topics, fascinating guests, and passionate callers on Hot 91.
It's Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Benita Adams, and today on Hampton Roads Voices, we're talking about surviving R. Kelly and looking at not just R. Kelly in the docuseries, but we're looking at it and broadening our conversation today about the mindset of being in an abusive relationship. We're talking about the mindset of a person who has been abused, and we want to take that conversation to a larger extent. But we definitely need to hear from you. Our number is 757-823-9110. 757-823-9110. We have one in-studio guest and one guest by phone. First of all, we have Dr. Bernard Curry. He is a licensed clinical social worker, a certified clinical trauma professional, and a certified sex offender treatment provider. Dr. Curry, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And on the line, we have Miss Mary Taylor. She's a victim advocate, and she's from the Samaritan House. Mary, thank you for being here today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. So let's just jump right in to this conversation again. Let me give you the number, 757-823-9110. We want to hear from you. What do you think about the docuseries? Did you see that, Surviving R. Kelly? What did you think about what the victims, alleged victims, said about what was going on? Do you think that, as woman said, it was just not one person, but there perhaps were many people involved? And were there signs? Give us a call, 823-9110. So, Dr. Curry, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about being a licensed clinical social worker and all the other elements that we mentioned?
The first one overall is sort of the foundation. I'm able to provide psychotherapy in a number of different situations for a number of different individuals. But throughout my career, I've always had an interest in working with victims of sexual abuse and physical abuse because I began my career in New York City investigating reports of child abuse and neglect.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then the longer I became involved and more interested, then I said I need to know more about actually working with trauma victims specific to. So I sought the educational experience and the training to be able to formalize the credentials so that indicates to those seeking someone that is qualified to work with victims of trauma and or other abuse, domestic abuse, whatever trauma they've experienced, that I'm competent to provide the service.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is important. Now, again, we have Mary Taylor on the line. She's a victim advocate from Samaritan House. Mary, tell us what you do as a victim advocate, please.
Sure. So the majority of my job is really helping victims or clients to maneuver the court system, from obtaining protective orders to figure out what's happening with criminal charges. We accompany them to court. We help them figure out what documents and what things need to happen next. And then we also connect them with services from attorney services to counseling to wherever it is that they need to go next so that they can move forward in a safe and healthy manner.
Mm-hmm. And it's so important that you said a safe and healthy manner. And we'll talk about that, of course. And again, we want to hear from you, 757-823-9110. We're talking about the series, talking about surviving R. Kelly and the mindset of a person who has abused and has and they've been abused and they have abused others. 823-9110. So let's jump right into that, Dr. Curry. What is the mindset? That's the word I chose to use in terms of a person who has been abused.
I want to be real careful
Okay.
in responding, because a mindset, as we're going to use a definition, is something that has developed over a period of time.
Okay.
Severe instances of trauma or abuse can certainly have a lasting and devastating impact, but ordinarily what we're looking at is over a period of time and repeated instances of physical abuse, sexual abuse, even psychological and emotional abuse. Okay, so the mindset that you would have with someone who may be more susceptible begins with how they feel about themselves. We talked about self-esteem, lower self-esteem. We have perhaps them seeking approval from someone that has caught their eye, or that they've either been enamored with, or they regard at a level where they're going to follow them, and not just social media. So there's a degree of influence, and at one point when the two interconnect, the influence the potential abuser has over the prospective abusee or person who is going to be abused is sort of already in place.
So, Mary, you as a victim advocate, is that what you've seen as well in terms of the influence that perhaps the abuser has over the person has been abused?
Well, sure. So I think it's important to recognize, like Mr. Curry was saying, many of our clients have been in previous relationships, whether it's from childhood or adulthood, but often it's not the first relationship that they've experienced this way. So there is a question of what has become normal in their life and what they recognize. But whether there has been or not, one of the first things you see begin to happen in an abusive relationship is slow and methodical isolation of that victim, a breaking down of relationships with their support system, with whether it's parents or family, close friends, so that the person who is what we would call an abuser or asserting that control over the victim often is the only remaining source of support.
Wow. And that is very, very interesting, because when I was doing the research for this show, it did mention isolation. And if you really think about it, that makes sense that you want that person to be removed or taken out of any situation that might be beneficial or might help them at all. And so that isolation I could see as a key point. So what do you think about that? 757-823-9110. What do you think about the information that we learned about R. Kelly? Had people known about this for a long time, and perhaps they just did not want to admit it? And have you been in a situation where you felt controlled or isolated? 757-823-9110. This is Hot 91.
Is Hampton Roads Voices. Hot 91.
If you're just joining us, I'm Benita Adams, and this is Hampton Roads Voices. Let me go ahead and give you the phone number, 757-823-9110. And this conversation really was sparked by the docuseries Surviving R. Kelly. And we wanted to expand that conversation by also talking about the dynamics of an abusive relationship. We want you to call 823-757-823-9110. Did you see the docuseries? What are your thoughts on R. Kelly, and what are your thoughts on overall what we're talking about, surviving and the dynamics of an abusive relationship? We have with us Dr. Bernard Curry, who is a licensed clinical social worker, and Mary Taylor, a victim advocate from the Samaritan House. Now, Dr. Curry, we were talking during the break, and we were talking about that mindset and thinking in terms of speaking to that person who is the abuser and the abusee. Yes. Go ahead and elaborate a little bit for our listeners, please.
What I was saying is that the abuser, with his influence over the victim, wants to be the all in all and everything in the potential victim's life. to the extent that he is able to drive a wedge in between the potential victim and the victim's friends and even family by saying certain things, mind games, manipulating, and insisting that the attention that they need and want can be given by the perpetrator or the abuser. Mm-hmm. And to the extent that the potential victim is receiving that attention, it creates a problem already of, okay, all I need is you.
Right.
I don't really need anybody else.
Right. And that's a dangerous situation to be in.
Yes.
If you think that's all I need is this person. And Mary, you have seen that the person, that perpetrator, is speaking into that person's ear and again saying negative things about not just them, but about their family members and support. And that's how many times they could be get into that isolated situation.
Yes. It's not always directly negative. It doesn't always sound like criticism of that person. Very often what we see is comments more to the effect of, well, you know, I know it's your sister's birthday, but you know what, she just doesn't like me. She always has negative things to say about me, and so you go ahead, I'm just not going to go. Or, you know, your parents or your best friend, they just really hate me, and they have these bad things to say about me. It's because they're not understanding, and they don't like you with me. Mm-hmm. And so anything that would convince that partner, that victim, that their friend or family is really against them, causes that victim really to pull away from those relationships.
Absolutely, which again causes that schism, that isolation. So that's going to move us a little bit into talking about the docuseries Surviving R. Kelly. And Dr. Curry, some of the women, obviously, that were victims of R. Kelly, or said they were victims of R. Kelly, it is some of that situation, depending on him, wanting stardom, wanting to be with a celebrity and so forth. How did that play out from a vantage point of your profession?
Well, first of all, as a disclaimer, there's a power imbalance with regards to the star and the stargazer, or the super fan, as one of the young ladies in the docuseries said. And having said that, yes, they were in some regards seeking what they thought would have been legitimate assistance in their career choices, which he exploited.
Right.
And to the extent that some people have a dream that is so powerful to have them say, I'll do whatever it takes, then they set themselves up for someone like an R. Kelly who can really say, okay, well, you said you do this, you said you do that.
Right.
Okay. And it becomes more of this is what you need to do. I'm telling you, this is how you're going to get where you need to go. Exactly. And it's unquestioning, because that person already has an established track record, so they are viewed as a expert, as it were, or someone who's already successful. The person is not really comfortable questioning, because that might cause them to lose what they see as their only chance to get where they want to be, stardom.
Absolutely. And Mary, but we can see that, and I'm sure you've seen that. It may not be celebrity versus super fan, but it could be, we could still see that imbalance of power just in a regular person's life. Is that true?
Yes, you absolutely can. You see it all over, but particularly with someone who holds a place of stardom or fame, really at any level. Those victims or our clients often, not only do they want what this person already can teach them, once they even begin to realize what is happening, it's terrifying to leave or to report, because the people they would report to are so enamored with the star themselves.
Wow.
That it's really scary even to approach the subject. let alone to be received by someone who may also be in awe of that star.
And is it in a case like that, but also in other cases that, see if I'm following you, that the person may not be believed because the person is at such a high level of credibility and maybe even stardom or status?
I think that happens sometimes,
Okay.
but the fear of that, I think, is greater even than the actual event of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And perhaps sometimes that's why they won't go and say what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I can completely understand that. Our number is 757-823-9110. 757-823-9110. We're talking about the docuseries Surviving R. Kelly, but we're broadening the conversation to talk about the dynamics of an abusive relationship, the dynamics of staying or going, but being in that place. We've talked about being isolated, and we've also talked about, and we will talk about, some tips and skills and things that we need to get out of that situation. 757-823-9110. So, Mary, I'm going to ask you, what are some of the signs that a person is in a very unhealthy relationship?
So really, some of those first signs are isolation, jealousy, controlling behavior, a very quick involvement. If we go from just meeting today to you are my everything, and I'm going to change my life to revolve around you in a matter of weeks, it's kind of a warning sign. Isolation, blaming other people for what is really the abuser's problems when they have struggles with relationships. Hypersensitivity, verbal abuse, the playful use of force in sex, rigid sex roles, a history of battering.
Oh, a history.
Very often women get in relationships, and not only women, but often women get into relationships and they begin to learn about a history that this person already has of abuse. Threats of violence or breaking things.
Right. I want to go back just a little bit about a quick involvement. I find that very interesting. So is it the abuser's idea to say, now all of a sudden you're my everything, or is it the other way around, or both agreeing to that?
It can be either or both. Often the abuser really wants a quick involvement. It's as a way to establish that control. In this area that we live in particular, a quick isolation is a simple thing because of the population that we live with, being so transient. But you see often, move away with me, come change your life, change where you're living.
Wow.
Just a quick change in circumstances from a very casual dating, we just met, to let's move in together, or I'm transferring, let's move away with me to my next duty station.
What makes that person agree to that? You have to leave all your friends and all your family. You're going to move across country, and I just met him a couple of months ago. What would make a person say yes to that?
So often we see one of two things. Either that has been their life history and their families, and that's normal for them. They don't recognize that it should be different. Or they've never seen anything like that before, and this person, it makes sense, right? They're moving, they have a career change, they have something, and they're inviting me to come, and I'm so in love or enamored by this person. I really don't want to risk losing that relationship, so I'm just going to go all in. I'm going to take a risk, and I'm going to go.
That sounds fascinating. So our number is 757-823-9110. We are talking about these elements and signs of being trapped in an abusive relationship. We're talking about the docuseries R. Kelly. What do you think about what's going on in terms of how it's progressing now, what the women were saying on the docuseries, or just overall your thoughts on that? 757-823-9110. This is Hot 91.
Is Hampton Roads Voices. Hot 91.
If you're just joining us, welcome to Hampton Roads Voices. Today we're talking about surviving R. Kelly and the dynamics of being in an abusive relationship. We are continued to have for our guest, Dr. Bernard Curry, who's a licensed clinical social worker, certified clinical trauma professional, and certified sex offender treatment provider. Dr. Curry, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
And we have Miss Mary Taylor, a victim advocate of the Samaritan House. Miss Taylor, again, thank you for being here.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go straight to the phones. We have some callers. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, please, and where are you calling from? Caller?
Hello.
Okay, hi. You're live on the air. If you choose to give us your name, what is it and where are you calling from, please?
I would like to stay anonymous.
That's
but I would like to tell you some of the things I've experienced or I know of.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Dealing in relationships with an abusive relationship, a person will be with you for a while and they'll cry about they have no friends and no family, and they will try to make you get isolated by pulling you out of the area you're at and try to go ahead and make something somewhere else. That isolation doesn't sit here and just, like, go move with me. They'll go ahead and while you're here, knowing that they don't have anything better to go move away from where you're at, they'll still try to isolate you by pulling you out, trying to pull you out by always saying, I don't have nobody here, I have no friends here, I want to leave here. And then when you don't do that, and you tell them what's the reasoning, they'll always sit there and say, you don't support them, you're not on their side. They do that.
And that makes, I'm asking the question, that makes the isolation more severe or more elevated when you say, oh, now I'm away from everyone I knew and now I only, to some extent, can depend on you. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct.
Absolutely, absolutely. We thank you so much for your call. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye. And if you can help anybody, pull them out, take care of them.
Absolutely.
You know, that mental stuff, that is something. The abusive stuff, it is mental. And, well, there are other ladies out here that really need that help.
Wow, absolutely. Thank you again for calling.
Goodbye.
Mary, that really goes to the point of what you were saying, what our caller was saying, when that person is isolated and they feel that they have no one there, that makes the isolation more severe.
Sure, it absolutely does. And like we were talking over the commercial, and even more than that is that victim begins to believe that they're the one that's to blame. So not only are they isolated, but they're being told, if you didn't do X, Y, Z, then I wouldn't have responded that way or I wouldn't have behaved that way, because domestic violence is always about control. It is never about anger. It's always about control. So the abuser will use that minimum amount of force necessary to maintain the control they're seeking. And so when a victim believes her behaviors are creating an anger, then she also thinks that her job is to fix her behavior.
Wow.
So that he will no longer be angry. But because it's about control, that's never, ever going to work.
Now, that is an amazing thing to hear. Now, Dr. Curry, I know that you are a certified clinical trauma professional, and yet you are a certified sex offender treatment provider. So piggybacking off of what our caller said and also what Mary has said, when it is a pedophile, as it were, have you seen that it is the factor of control, is the factor of telling the person that he or she needs to fix his or her behavior? What is the thinking there?
Well, first of all, the definition of a pedophile may apply to R. Kelly because of his interest in someone who is 14 or under. So pedophiles are involved with and attracted to children. If it is their own child or someone they have access to, a niece or nephew or something like that, it is over a period of time that they're grooming them. And so what we've been talking about probably has more to do with older and or adults as opposed to a grooming ritual with children. Now, in adult domestic violence and sexual abuse victims, at some point there is grooming because the perpetrator or abuser makes the victim feel like they are all in all on top of the world, can't do anything wrong. And in that regard, they're giving them the attention and, in the victim's mind, the love that they need or feel they've been missing. Okay, so there is a difference in that, and most pedophiles are not going to. And R. Kelly is a very, very extreme example. Most pedophiles are not going to have the resources and the locations and the means like a R. Kelly did.
Absolutely. Okay, very good point. We have a couple of callers on the line. Do we have them? We have our callers on the line. Let's take our first caller. Caller, you're live on the air. If you choose to give us your name, that's fine. And where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Chesapeake, Virginia.
Okay, Chesapeake. What is your question or comment?
My question is, in this situation, do you all, because one of my questions that a lot of people did not address is, why were parents taking teenage girls to a concert such as the nature of R. Kelly? R. Kelly has one of the most raunchiest concerts out of any performer, probably arguably, in any kind of R&B or urban culture. So what state of mind would a parent be in to where they would take their teenage daughter to such a sexually raunchy type of concert from with a grown man? And also, do you feel that these type of parents that would accompany their child to concerts such of that nature also help the psychology of the young girl to feel like it was okay to partake in a relationship with an adult?
That is a very interesting perspective. Thank you so much. I'm going to throw that to one of our guests.
Okay.
Thank you so much for calling.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Dr. Curry.
Yes, it's a very interesting question, and she brings up the parental responsibility. My mother used to say that she would never say what I wouldn't do when I was not around her.
Right.
And so a lot of parents may feel, well, as long as I'm with my child, I can control. But that control is limited more to physical per se. So when parents, my opinion, when parents take children to those types of concerts, they see themselves as being a chaperone and their child not being damaged or negatively influenced by being exposed to that. But in actuality, their children may be affected in ways that the parents never comprehended, and it may open them up to making decisions that are not healthy for them. So it's a parental right, but parents have to take responsibility for when they introduce their children to spectacles such as an R. Kelly concert.
Mary, what have your experiences been with your clients in terms of when a person has been exposed to something, maybe it has not been an R. Kelly concert, but exposed to perhaps something that you would not think a child should be exposed to, or a young adult?
Sure. So I should say I predominantly work with adults.
Okay.
So working with children is not what I do most. But I do spend a lot of time with parents who are telling me, you know, their kids have seen these things, but they're also being exposed to it in other places, and so challenging the ideas that they already have is quite difficult. So it's both and it's what the kids are being exposed to that the parents are bringing them to, but also the ideas of their peers and the media that they're ingesting.
Right. But have you seen, and because you work with adults, let's take it from that vantage point that perhaps they were exposed, even though they are adults now, but perhaps they were exposed to something by way of their parent or family member or friend when they were younger that shaped their outlook on life, even though they are adults now.
Sure. Absolutely. We have someone with Samaritan House who does education for on healthy relationships in the middle schools, and they do an exercise where they go in and they give a scenario from beginning to end of the relationship, and they ask all the students in the classroom to sit down when they would leave that relationship. And there were many students who stayed for quite some time, and there was one student who remained standing for the entire, up until the person was killed in the relationship. And the other students began asking, why are you still standing? What is wrong with you that you're still there? And the student is just saying, well, because that's just reality. That's just what love is. That is what they had seen. That's what they'd been exposed to, whether it was in their home or in other relationships that were close to them. It dramatically affects what they see and view as normal.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about abusive relationships, and yet we're talking about the R. Kelly docuseries. We've talked about control and isolation, and we want to hear your perspective, so give us a call, 757-823-9110. This is Hot 91.
Is Hampton Roads Voices. Hot 91.
Welcome back, everybody. If you're just joining us, this is Hampton Roads Voices, and we're talking about surviving R. Kelly and the dynamics of an abusive relationship. We still have with us Dr. Bernard Curry and Miss Mary Taylor. So I want to make sure that we get to the point, we were kind of talking about this during the break, but when we were, Mary, when you were talking about isolation, and then one of our callers talked about that as well, that when the abuser or the perpetrator, what have you, isolates the other person. Sometimes they feel, or when you mention signs of abuse, that they have not known each other very long, and the person says, well, let's just move away together and this kind of thing, that causes problems. But then, Dr. Curry, you mentioned, this is what I want you to emphasize for our listeners, is that sometimes a person, they feel like no one loves them unconditionally, or they've made such a big mistake and they can't go back now.
Right. What I was saying is that when the victim realizes that the family that was telling them to get out of the relationship, the friends that were telling them to get out of the relationship were right, they feel some kind of way about being able to, or actually finding the courage to say to those people, hey, you were right and I need help getting out.
Right.
Getting out is not easy. It's not easy. And so what I was saying is we all in our life should have or try to cultivate a relationship, healthy relationship with someone who we know loves and cares about us unconditionally, so that even when we screw up really bad, we know we can call that person and they're going to accept and love and support us and be there. And we're not going to be embarrassed to the point where it prevents us from reaching out for help.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I watched the docuseries as I told you, because I wanted to have a frame of reference. I didn't want to come in here and talk about it. And in the docuseries, there were certainly parents who never told their children that they were turning their back on them. They always wanted their children to know they were loved and could come home, and that they were wanting them to come home.
Absolutely. And Mary, you were saying that sometimes it doesn't always have to be a family member. It could be a neighbor, or it could be a teacher, or it could be someone that we interact with that sees what's going on.
Absolutely. I mean, any of those parents would say to their child, whatever it takes for you to be safe, that's what I want for you.
Exactly.
And really, silence is what perpetuates domestic violence so so quickly and easily. But when people begin to talk about what's happening to them, they will often be surprised. Their neighbors, their coworkers, just acquaintances who may not know them very well have already observed some of those things. They may already be aware and just not feel like it's their place. And so just by beginning to talk about what's happening, it can be little bits at a time. Victims will often find they have sources of support around them who can help safety plan with them, can help create code words, can help connect them with resources they didn't even know were available.
Absolutely. We have a caller on the line. Caller, if you choose to give your name, what is your name and where are you calling from, please?
Hi, I'm Denise, and I'm calling from Virginia Beach.
Okay, Denise, what is your question or comment? You're live.
Okay, my comment is there's so many different dynamics and layers to this topic today. Right? So one of the things, and let me just give you a really brief background of me. I'm originally from New York, and I was raised in a creative arts family. My mother was very involved in entertainment on more the public relations side. Mm-hmm. I did a lot of background singing for a lot of different artists, and my brother did lighting, sound stage, things like that. And I can't tell you the amount of things that we've seen and been exposed to. And the truth of the matter also that we need to interject into this conversation is some of the normalcies of the entertainment business.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I've also done artist management as well. So when you look up the word groupie, and this is not about victim shaming or anything at all, I've had to counsel and I've had to coach many young girls who are groupies. They go around and they follow artists. They not only sleep with the artists, they sleep with the security, they sleep with the road managers, band members, you name it. Mm-hmm. There needs to be a discussion about accountability.
I see. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There has to be. Plus, we're in a time now. I have a daughter who's actually an NSU student, but she was born with a learning disorder. Mm-hmm. So in my time during college, I also studied psychology. There's such an influx of disorders that permeate sexual behaviors right now that you wouldn't believe how many, not just because of what our children are exposed to, but also what they are inheriting genetically
interesting.
In their sexual behaviors. We have to have conversations about things like this.
That is a really fascinating perspective.
Yeah. And again, if we really knew, like my mother shared stories. She grew up in Harlem in the 60s, in the 50s and 60s, and the amount of stories that she can share in terms of physical abuse from artists, young girls that run after them, even with parents at home. And the caller that called before is absolutely right. I've actually gone to different R. Kelly shows back in the 90s. It's always been raunchy.
Wow.
And the parents need to be accountable for things like that.
Right. I see what you're saying.
There needs to be certain laws that are interjected even in the entertainment world. Stacey Lattisaw dealt with it with music execs trying to physically abuse her at a young age. It's very real in that industry.
Very real. Denise, thank you so much for your call and from your perspective.
God bless you guys. I love your show.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Bye. Dr. Gurry, I'm going to throw that to you. She was saying some things are just normal, groupies, disorders. How do we manage all of that?
Well, first of all, I was real impressed with the caller. As we all noticed and all the listeners heard, that she had to preface her remark by saying, I'm not blaming the victim. And I truly believe that it's almost impossible to have a frank, honest discussion that includes questions that involves, in some people's minds, an assignment of blame where I look for an acceptance of responsibility. Because people who are of a certain mindset and have narrow views, they're going to hear a question that appears to question a victim.
Right.
And then we're not going to have a conversation. I thought about that as well. I have been having conversations, and I said, what about the groupies? What about these ladies who pursue these professional sports figures?
Definitely.
Okay. So the caller is absolutely right. But how many mothers really have conversations with their children, and at what age and over what period of time, about what they should and should not do? And let's just acknowledge this. Young people never think that old people know what they're talking about. They just don't.
Right.
You've got to hammer it in. So the caller has made some great points, and I'm sure this is going to be an ongoing conversation.
Oh, it absolutely is. And Mary, I know that I'm assuming, let me say it this way, of some of the people that you have, especially women, work with, these are some of the same kinds of things. Maybe you don't say it as if responsibility, but how do you add some of what our caller Denise said in terms of the people that you work with?
Sure. So the approach that I tend to take with my clients, and I find is most effective, the shame is already there, blame for things that are real, that are legitimate, things that they are taking responsibility for, but also shame for parts that is not their fault. And it's really challenging for them to distinguish between the two in a way that helps them to move forward. I mean, you never, ever, ever change someone by simply telling them what they're doing wrong and expecting them to choose differently. The other component that must come along with that responsibility is the idea and the sense that I have value and I can choose something better, and I'm worth choosing better. I'm worth making a better choice. So along with teaching things that are good and things that are not good, you must begin to teach children, I am valuable. I have worth. I am an important person, and I can expect to be treated that way, and I should expect to be treated that way. And not only do I have value, but the people, my peers, my siblings, my girlfriends, they have value as well. And so I not only should expect to be treated well, and question when something doesn't look that way, but I also have a responsibility to watch and treat others well.
I find that so important that you just said that, Mary, in terms of teaching our children from a young age that they have value and that they have worth and that they don't have to accept just any kind of treatment, but that does obviously, as you know, working with your clients, it just takes time to change that mindset, to change that script in their head that perhaps they've heard ever since they were a child, and now they're an adult and they're in situations, and you have to help them change the script.
Sure. Something I have to tell my clients regularly, or I choose to tell my clients regularly, they often say, but I still love him. But I still love them. And I find myself reminding them that it's okay to say, I love you, and what you're doing is not okay. So those two things are not mutually exclusive. You can say both, I love you, and I am not going to live in an unsafe way any longer.
Absolutely. Now, Mary, I know that you're going to have to leave us very soon. Tell us some of the services and so forth at the Samaritan House.
Sure. So we actually have 12 shelters throughout the city. So we shelter those who are in imminent danger and really fleeing that domestic violence situation. We have victim advocacy services so that we walk with clients through the court system. We really take an approach that really puts the power back in that client's hands. They've had enough decisions made for them and choices taken away from them. So we really want to empower them and help them to make positive decisions and recognize that they really have the ability to live safely on their own. So there's everything from shelter services to victim advocacy services to just they can call and get resources if that's all they're looking for. They can choose to accept or refuse whatever whatever resources they're wanting from us. And just because they accept one thing does not mean they have to accept another. So it's really personalized to the client and what they're ready for. So there is a hotline in the area. Samaritan House serves clients who are living in Virginia Beach. Each city has their own service. So there's a 24-hour crisis hotline, the number 251-0144, with experts who are available 24 hours a day to receive calls and connect clients with whatever services they need in the city where they're located. And those service providers will actually call the client back, taking some of the scariness out of the hands of that client, so that just that one call to the crisis hotline and they will be connected by someone on the hotline with the services in the city they are.
And can you give us that crisis number one more time, please?
Sure. The crisis hotline number, 251-0144. And just for information purposes, there's so much more in domestic violence services, availability, SamaritanHouseVA.org, and you can always follow on Facebook as well.
Absolutely. And we've been hearing from Mary Taylor. She's a victim advocate from the Samaritan House. Ms. Taylor, thank you so much for your insights today. We've really enjoyed having you on our show.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. And on the other side of the break, we're going to continue with Dr. Bernard Curry, who's a licensed clinical social worker, and we'll be joined by Ms. Koshuan Adams from the YWCA. Keep it locked here on Hot 91.
Is Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
Welcome, everybody, and welcome back to Hampton Roads Voices, where we speak life into our community. Today, we're talking about a very interesting topic based on the docuseries Surviving R. Kelly. We're talking about that issue today, and we're also expanding that to talk about the dynamics of an abusive relationship. We have right here in our studio Dr. Bernard Curry. He is a licensed clinical social worker, a certified clinical trauma professional, and a certified sex offender treatment provider. Dr. Curry, thank you for being with us the second hour.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for having me.
And joining us now by phone, Koshuan Adams. She's from the YWCA. She's a marketing and public relations specialist. Ms. Adams, thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be able to talk about this tonight.
Absolutely. So let's start by asking you to tell us a bit about the services at the YWCA.
Sure. So at the YW, we provide shelter and crisis services to women who are in crisis, whether that be situations with domestic violence or sexual assault. Not only are services for women, but they're also for families and men as well.
Very interesting. And so you said crisis shelter and sexual abuse for women, men, children, and families.
Yes. So we provide services for anyone who lives in the city of Norfolk. I know earlier you had their Samaritan House. We do work with them as well. They're over in Virginia Beach. Mm-hmm. But we do pretty much kind of like the same thing, but we just serve the residents in Norfolk. We are actually the only domestic violence shelter in our city. We've been operating in Norfolk now for about 40 years.
Very interesting. And when a person comes to you, are they fleeing a abusive relationship, or what is the situation that, and I know every relationship is different and every situation and client is somewhat different, but overall, what are they coming from when they need to go to you for your services?
So one of the major services that we offer, that we provide, is our CCR, our Coordinated Crisis Response Program. Mm-hmm. And that is a 24-hour hotline that we run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, where someone in crisis can call if they need help. And when they call, they will be connected to a trained professional who can help decipher what kind of services they need, how to get them help, whatever they may need. Sometimes some people just need to talk, just to kind of de-escalate a situation. That phrase, talk people off the edge, sometimes they do that as well. Mm-hmm. So that's the CCR that we offer. And so a lot of times we have clients come from there, whether they need shelter, that's one service that they can come to the CCR.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we want to hear from you. Our number is 757 823-9110. We're talking about Surviving R. Kelly, the docuseries, and also we are speaking with Ms. Quayshawn Adams from the YWCA and licensed clinical social worker, Dr. Bernard Curry. Now, Dr. Curry, when I was looking at the material to prepare for this show, I came across something that said that hurt people hurt other people. Is that a true statement? And how is that connected to abusive relationships?
It is not as simple as something that always applies, because statistically the research supports that everyone who is abused does not then go on to abuse others. Okay. And that includes physical and sexual. I agree with the fact that, yes, there are people who have been hurt and they will lash out at others. Now, your typical example that is always brought up is don't use corporal punishment when you discipline your kids, because kids who, experience corporal punishment from parents, they bully other kids.
Okay.
Okay, so if you beat your kids as a discipline, they're going to go and beat somebody else up. And then they grow up.
Right.
Okay, so in terms of hurt people, hurt others, it's kind of amorphous and out there, because there then are different levels of hurt, and it depends on how easily you are hurt. From a word to an action.
Okay. So what makes, I'm going to go with you, Ms. Adams, what makes one person, if we're all hurt, or all of us potentially we have been hurt, what makes one person act out versus another act out?
Again, I'm sorry.
Oh, Ms. Adams, and then I'll go to Dr. Curry.
Okay, sorry. I think the major thing is healing. I think I remember seeing a meme on social media, and it was saying that a person can grow, an alcoholic father can have two twin boys. One boy can turn up to be an alcoholic. The other twin boy can never touch alcohol. It just depends on the perspective, and it's just something that you never know. I think it's important that people who are hurt, who are abused, that they reach out and get help. Whether that be just for their own healing because they want to move forward in their lives, or just because they don't want to hurt someone else, or whatever the case may be. Getting help is, I think, the number one thing that's important there.
Absolutely. We have a caller on the line. Caller, if you choose to give your name, what is your name, please, and where are you calling from?
My name is Khalil Brenby. I'm a student at Norfolk State University. I'm in Ms. Adams' Peace class.
Okay. And what is your question, please?
My question essentially is, okay, so we have all this support for our black women and our young black girls, but we also have the negative side of people essentially defending R. Kelly, and they are basically caping for him. So my question is, what is going to take for our people to all unify and say, okay, this is wrong? Because although he made all these great songs, he's still a predator on our young black girls, and that's not something that needs to be shunned away or swept under the rug. Like, we have to handle this problem up front.
So do you mean just with R. Kelly or just in our community overall?
Yes, of course with R. Kelly, and then, of course, with the whole community, because it happens a lot where everything just gets swept under the rug.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for calling. I appreciate that.
All right, no problem.
Okay. Dr. Curry.
Yes, ma'am.
The caller is saying that this goes far beyond what we saw in the docu-series with R. Kelly, that some of these issues are just in our community.
Sure.
Speaking specifically as, I know he is, African-American community.
Well, if you see something, say something.
Okay.
I saw a woman years ago whose father was very active and prominent in local politics. And she came to me to talk about how her brother had sexually molested her and suspected he was doing it to her son, his nephew. And when I brought the father in so I could help her tell her father what was going on, he just flat out denied it, actually said I had put that into his daughter's head. And she was devastated, of course, and I was somewhat surprised and taken aback. We as a people, African Americans, unfortunately have sort of as a watchword, don't talk about what goes on in our home. And it continues to be something that is observed. I have a conversation with people about a saying, snitches get stitches, and I've got a problem with that. So what the caller has to do and what everyone listening has to do is find the courage to be able to say something. And when I had a discussion with a group of people about the snitches get stitches things, I turned it on them and said, okay, but what if your family member was a victim? Would you want someone to step up and say something or do something or identify the perpetrator? And so until it happens to you, it's a different mindset. So we all have to have the courage to just say what is on our mind and what is morally right, what is morally wrong, and go from there.
Now, Ms. Adams, I know, excuse me, I'm assuming rather that many of your clients that come to the YWCA perhaps have been in this situation. So what do you tell their family members, if you're able to speak with them, about just being there as their support system?
We definitely offer counseling services, and one of those things that our counselors always include is that they have the support that they need for families. I know it's tough, it's heavy. People don't know how to deal with it. They don't want to push, the victims away when they're coming. They come back and forth. The average victim say that they'll leave their abuser 7 times before that they actually make a step and leave for good. And so it's a very long process. So you just have to be supportive the best way you can. It's different for everyone.
7 times you're saying they have to go and come back and go and come back before there's a final decision. What does it take sometimes for them to make that final decision? Ms. Adams.
Like I said, it's very different for everyone. Sometimes I know for some women a child may get involved. Women have children, so it's like that's a very monumental thing for women when they become a mother. And so I know that a lot of the times when people are trying to, that's a great motivation for them. If it's just being stuck in the same type of situations over and over again, just different things make them come up. But I think one of them is definitely becoming a mother and having children. They don't want to see they don't want their children to see them growing up being abused. And so that's one of them.
And so, Dr. Curry, what does it take for a person to say, I'm going to take a risk? Maybe it's a neighbor, maybe it is someone, a teacher or someone that sees this person. What has to take place, perhaps, generally, for them to say, I'm going to take this risk and say, I know that something's going on in your life, or go to that parent? What has to take place there?
It has to involve a deep sense of what is morally right, along with indeterminable amount of courage. Okay? Wow. You have to take a chance, because here's the thing. We see things and we don't say anything, and then there's a tragedy.
Right.
Okay? And so what I say to people during the course of my interactions with them, because there are differences and some are nuances and some are very, very different, but I simply point out to them that you don't want to have had knowledge and the ability to help someone, fail to do so, and then there is a tragedy, because then you are going to have to live with that regardless of what you say to yourself. You could have prevented a tragedy and you said nothing.
Right. So I love that you say you have to have that courage. So we want to hear from you, 757-823-9110. If you've been in that situation, did you stand up and have the courage to say, I see something and I believe something's going on, or be that moral support for that person? 757-823-9110 on Hot 91.
Is Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Benita Adams, and Hampton Roads Voices, where today we're talking about surviving R. Kelly and the docuseries, and then also the larger perspective of domestic violence and abuse, and even in the African American community. We're joined on the line by Quayshawn Adams. She's from the YWCA, and in-studio guest Dr. Bernard Curry, who's a licensed clinical social worker. I want to take a perspective on this conversation in terms of the African American community. One of our callers said, and I've listened to some people talk about this, in terms of had these not been African American women, would the conversation be different? If R. Kelly had not been an African American, if he had not been an African American R&B singer, would this conversation be different? Dr. Curry, what do you think?
I think that R. Kelly would have been convicted if it had been little white girls instead of black girls. And watching the documentary, there were a number of things that stood out for me, and I don't profess to keep up with rap, but there's a episode or an interview with Chance the Rapper, and he says, I regret, doing that song with R. Kelly. He said, and here's exactly what he said. It's a quote. He said, but I didn't believe the accusers because they were black women.
Oh my!
So what does that say about the mindset back then, which may still be the case now? But let's not be so gender specific, because in the documentary there were so many black women that continued to support R. Kelly, even up to and including the trial. And when he was not convicted, they took that as vindication of they were correct in supporting him. Obviously, that was prior to the documentary coming out.
Absolutely. And that is really such an interesting thought to throw out to our listeners. Again, 757-823-9110. Had these not been African-American women, how do you think it would have gone differently? Had it been white women, would it have gone differently if R. Kelly had not been black? I really want to hear from you. 823-9110. Let me see what you're thinking. Now, Miss Adams, I want to go with you with that same question. How do you think it would have gone differently?
Sure. So, of course, there's just been great buzz and a great amount of social awareness for this topic. And I think one of the big takeaways for me is that, this is not the first time that we have heard about R. Kelly with these accusations. This is not the first time. The whole trial and his first situation with the tape, that happened back in 2008, where a survivor by the name of Lisa Van Allen came up with the tape. She stole the tape from him and came up, and no one wanted to listen to her. No one cared. We all kind of swept it under the rug. We all kind of had the mentality that, here goes the system and the media trying to bring down one of our great black men that we have, because we obviously don't have many. That's the kind of mentality that it was. That's why I'm grateful that now victims and survivors' stories are being heard, and that we are now taking them seriously and doing something about it. It's just black women and black people in general, we're dehumanized. And so no one cares that a little black child is being hurt. No one cares. And it just goes back to the demonization that we have with racism. But that was one of my takeaways from it.
Now, and that is critical to this larger conversation, the larger conversation of what's going on, not just with this particular situation, but other situations as well. Again, I want to hear from you. 757-823-9110. Give us a call. What do you think about this in terms of the African American community? 757-823-9110. So when I asked you, Dr. Curry, in terms of hurt people hurt other people, we know that R. Kelly, according to the docuseries, he was abused by family members, his sister, or maybe some other family members. Did they indicate that that was a catalyst, if one can indicate that type of thing, that was the catalyst of this kind of behavior?
Well, first of all, the person that Ms. Adams identified, Lisa Van Allen, she features prominently in the documentary. Okay. And she shared some particular details about her involvement with R. Kelly and the 14-year-old victim that was in the video.
Right.
What I really liked about the documentary was that throughout they featured psychologists, clinical psychologists, who appeared to be very knowledgeable, competent, and respectful and almost neutral in explaining the behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So R. Kelly fit the profile of a pedophile, okay, first of all, and then obviously someone who commits domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't happen overnight, and what did happen and what really struck me from the documentary is that there were other men, almost the majority of black men in his employ, who were aware of his proclivities, liking younger girls, and they looked the other way. They knew what was going on, and they looked the other way. So R. Kelly succeeded because his inner circle didn't have anyone that was willing to and had the courage to say, I can't stand by and watch you do this to these young girls. They enabled him to continue for the longest time, as opposed to someone out on the street where a number of different people in different walks of life, vocation, and occupations might have seen something and said something.
Yes. So I want to stay with you for just a moment, then Ms. Adams, I'm going to come to you. What is the profile? You mentioned the profile of domestic violence, a profile, and I'm talking about generally, of a pedophile. What is it? What is the profile?
Well, are you asking about the pedophile or the domestic violence guy?
I'm going to start with, because those are two different things. Yeah. I'm going to start with the pedophile.
Well, unfortunately, they may or may not have in their background having been sexually abused, severely physically abused as a child. They certainly would have been exposed to sexually explicit material vis-a-vis pornography, because depending on their age, the internet was not around. So they had to look at magazines and go to stores to obtain that, okay? Exposure to pornography, violent pornography, anything that can make an influence on someone, it does affect their psyche. They can succumb to it. They begin to experience it, and once it is something that really arouses them, then they become aroused to potentially the wrong thing.
Right.
Okay, because sadism, rough sex, physical violence during sex between two consenting adults, by others, by the observers, are described as that's domestic violence, et cetera, et cetera. Those two consenting adults might say, but this is what we enjoy, okay? But the pedophile is specifically interested in, attracted to younger children, young children up to a certain age.
Right.
In the documentary, R. Kelly at some point said, well, I like younger, I like petite, I like a certain style. Pedophiles have a preference. And once a victim grows up and becomes more womanly in their body features, then the pedophile is no longer interested, because they don't resemble the childlike person that they had been grooming and involved with all that time.
That is fascinating. Look, talking about that profile. 757-823-9110. What is your perspective overall of what we've been hearing, especially as it relates to the African American community, black women, and as we mentioned, these profiles? Give us a call, 757-823-9110. Now, again, we're talking to Quayshawn Adams, Ms. Quayshawn Adams from the YWCA. Ms. Adams, you heard Dr. Curry talk about this profile. Now, in terms of your clients there at the YWCA, is there a profile, as it were, to the person who comes and needs help?
Our services are for anyone. The most that we see a lot of women between the ages of 18 to about 25. And African American is our biggest demographic there. So a large amount of our clients are between that age group.
Right. And any particular reason from your research that you find that this is the demographic?
No, not in any way, shape, or form. And that's the thing about domestic violence, and that's why we want to bring as much awareness as we can to it, because it really doesn't matter what kind of economic background you come from. Doesn't matter your educational background, doesn't matter your age demographic, your race, your ethnicity. Domestic violence that happens is between interpersonal relationships. And as long as you are in an interpersonal relationship, you have the risk of being in a domestic violence situation.
So is domestic violence, Ms. Adams, and abuse, and then Dr. Curry, is it actually about power? If not, what is it about generally? So is this about power?
We definitely advocate that it's about power and control.
Mm-hmm.
One of the social media is a great way that we interact, and we've been beginning to interact with our clients and our audience. And we post like what we call infographics, and we post with the power and control wheel. And what it is it's pretty much just a graphic, and it kind of, if you can relate to it, you kind of pretty much check off the wheel, and you can kind of see the dynamics there. And it gained up a lot of attention. I think this being educational and providing resources to people to bring awareness to it, because sometimes you really don't know what kind of situation you're in until you are from the outside looking in. If you can kind of step away from it for a moment and kind of see what's really going on in the situation.
Interesting. Well, we're going to take a quick break now. Our number when we come back, 757-823-9110. We want to hear from you. This is Hot 91.
Is Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
I'm Benita Adams. This is Hampton Roads Voices. Our number is 757-823-9110. And we're talking about the dynamics of abusive relationships in light of the docuseries Surviving R. Kelly. Give us a call. Give us your opinion on that, 757-823-9110. Now, Dr. Curry, you were talking about something very interesting, and Ms. Adams as well. Our guest is Dr. Bernard Curry, a licensed clinical social worker, a certified clinical trauma professional, and a certified sex offender treatment provider. And we also have Ms. Quayshawn Adams from the YWCA. Now, during the break, you were talking about something that I found very fascinating when Ms. Adams mentioned the Duluth Wheel of Power. But you were saying that this power, we can see that not just in opposite sex relationships, it's always the man on the woman or the woman on the man. It can also be in same sex relationships, which really shows us so much that domestic violence can be about power, and it can be also about control.
And certainly not exclusively something that is perpetrated by men only, men on women. And what I have found, because I've been fortunate and privileged enough to work with the LGBT community, and primarily same-sex with women couples, their anger toward a partner, the domestic violence, physical violence, the abuse that is perpetrated on their partner, to me has rivaled some of what I've seen with men on women. So I just wanted to make sure that it's actually understood that, it happens, and it's regardless of gender or stated identification, self-identification, education, employment or occupation, because I've dealt with doctors who have had issues with domestic violence in their relationship.
That is such an important piece to this conversation. We have one caller on the line. If you choose to give your name, what is your name and where are you calling from, please?
Hello?
Yes, you're live on the air. What is your name and your question, please?
My name is Philip Gaines.
Okay, Philip James. And Mr. James, what is your question, please, or comment?
Gaines.
Gaines. I'm sorry, Mr. Gaines.
My comment is, I agree with what Ms. Kelly has done in his past is wrong, but my thing is, like, and I know you guys may have heard this many times by other people, like, let's say, for example, the Harvey Weinsteins and the other guys, I heard that today that Ted Nugent, right, had some inappropriate behavior with a young lady, Courtney Love. It's on the internet. It's on YouTube as well, She confessed to that. But I'm saying, like, right now they're honing in on R. Kelly, and maybe rightfully so, but I'm saying, is there going to be a campaign to go after others, you think?
That's an interesting question.
Because Hollywood is smeared with those type people. It's like we want to turn a blind eye to that, and right now it's like we're focusing everything on R. Kelly, and everybody's like, looking to the left. Oh, yeah, it's him. But it's not him. It's more than just him. And that's my thing, man.
Do you think it's overdone? You think this campaign against him is unfair, or you're just saying we should equally look at others as well?
Well, as our president said, man, we should drain the swamp, right? Because R. Kelly is just one part of a mass problem. I mean, Mr. Terry Crews, in Hollywood, remember when he said that he went to a party, whatever, and the man just openly groped him in front of his wife? Mm-hmm. That goes on, like that behavior in Kevin Spacey and all of these guys we've been hearing about. But we only heard about one guy, and he's one of us, that just drag him through the mud. It's like he's on the cross, and everybody's throwing darts, knives, everything they can have on it. They say, oh, he's the only one that's out there doing it. No, he's not. And I know that it's a media campaign. I feel it's a media campaign that's out, to just make the black man, it seems that he's just the boogeyman right now. He's the boogeyman with all of this right here. It's like he's a predator with all of this toxic masculinity going on that he has right now. That's all I got to say, man. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gaines, for calling.
You're welcome.
Dr. Curry, he's a black man and we're attacking him because he's a black man, or because he's a black man who's a predator, or we are saying, look at everybody else and they're getting away with it. What are your thoughts from our caller?
Before I saw Mr. Gaines made some very good points. Before I even saw the documentary, I sort of drew some conclusions and then said I need to look at the documentary. And Mr. Gaines is absolutely correct. R. Kelly is a pedophile and a serial abuser, a domestic violence person who engages in domestic violence, and he's black. Mm-hmm. Okay? I don't think that people said R. Kelly is black, so we're going to go after him. I understand what I sensed was frustration in Mr. Gaines' voice, because right now R. Kelly is the flavor of the month. Mm-hmm. Okay? And so in coming here, I thought about to what end will R. Kelly fall from our attention spans. Obviously, clearly there is a media campaign. Yes. Hashtag mute R. Kelly. And we had some discussions off the air about that and how his tentacle extends other than just his own recordings. Okay. So I would say to people, the idea is, if you feel that strongly about it, why don't you engage in an exercise? Write down what you think should happen to R. Kelly, and then think about whether or not that's even going to happen to him in his lifetime, let alone in your lifetime. And when R. Kelly's issue has been resolved, however it is resolved, then where do these people whose life seems to only exist to point out what R. Kelly has done, what do they do afterwards?
I find that fascinating that you say the flavor of the month, having a background in media. I do understand. I think all of us really understand that a topic is really hot for a moment, and then we do move on to something else, or another person, or another situation, or another movement. And so I think that's important. Ms. Adams, R. Kelly, because he's black, is this different? What do you think?
Definitely. So I think, what I mentioned before, what the most fascinating thing about this is the social awareness. We need to have a conversation about rape culture, about domestic violence, about sexual assault. And so if anything, I'm just happy that we are having a conversation about this to bring awareness to it. Just like Mr. Gaines called, of course, his frustrations are definitely heard and they're understood. But Kevin Spacey, I think he's in court right now. Harvey Weinstein, he is out on bail. But I feel like all of these predators and people who have brought a lot of harm to people's lives, they need to have our justice system handle them. And that's what it's there for.
Yes.
And I feel like as long as we keep having this conversation, all of those predators who've been getting away with all these things for years, we have our chance, we have our opportunity to let it get handled.
Yes.
And so I think that's what's most important as well.
Yeah. Okay. It is important.
It is very important. Yes. And that's why a conversation like we're having tonight is critical to just the overall dialogue of what's going on and the awareness. So what do you think about what our caller said? 757-823-9110. In terms of all that we've said, in terms of the African-American community, 757-823-9110. So how do you counsel, change, correct help cure, I just don't know what better word to say, a pedophile or an abuser, Dr. Curry?
It is much more difficult in treating a pedophile, and I am talking about someone accurately diagnosed as a pedophile, because how they came to become a pedophile took years potentially. Okay. And so the current standard really is management, supervision, and observation. And it's ongoing over a period of time, if not their entire lives. And one tool, obviously, is in every state, the sex offender registry. Okay. The use of the polygraph, even though not admissible in court, is something that is used to detect their being truthful or not. And initially there is one, and it's called a full disclosure. And then after that, they can have what are called maintenance polygraphs, where they are really the polygraph, the parole or probation officer, everyone else involved is looking to see deception. Okay. So it's more of a management and a supervision issue than it is saying this person is going to be cured. The best you can hope for is the person 100% participating in the therapy, them being aware of when they are feeling and having thoughts that they should not have, and them doing what they need to do by reaching out, by contacting others. There's actually a Sex Abuse Anonymous group, similar to Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous, where people who have issues such as sex addiction will go to talk about what they're experiencing and how they're trying to get help.
Absolutely. Now, Ms. Adams, what do you say to the person who has been in this controlling relationship, this relationship that is about power, this relationship that's been about violence? How did they begin to come out of that?
So like I mentioned earlier, that it takes about 7 times for a victim to leave their abuser. The great thing about the YW and what we do is we meet victims where they are. If they just want to talk, they may not be ready to leave yet. They might not have the courage to do. Wherever they are, they may have just been sexually assaulted, but they might not want to file charges, but they may want to get a rape kit. They want to, whatever they need, that's where we meet them. That's where we meet them, at that place. And we just want to provide that support and all those wraparound services for them. So it just depends on what they want. We're here for support, so they just need to reach out to us. I just want to mention our crisis line again, it's 757-251-0144.
Absolutely. And I find that fascinating. So tell us one more time, we're just about ready to wrap up. Again, review some of the services that the YW has, just in case someone did not hear them at the top of the show.
Sure. So we provide crisis services. We do provide shelter, so crisis services for children, women, LGBTQ community, all races, ages, cultures, economic backgrounds. It doesn't matter. You can use our services. We have emergency shelter, hospital accompaniment, victim advocacy. Again, we have the crisis hotline. We also offer counseling services. So if you want to see a counselor, we offer those. All of our counselors are trained in trauma-informed care, so they really know what they're doing when it comes to victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. We also have counseling services.
Absolutely. And Dr. Curry, services that you offer in your practice?
Counseling, individual, family, group, marital counseling. We provide substance abuse counseling as well. And a buzzword in our profession is trauma-informed or cognitive behavioral treatment, trauma-informed. And so I'm glad to hear that Ms. Adams says that all of her counselors are trained in that, because if you're not trained in that and we can't know everything and be good at everything, then it's not something you should engage in, and you should refer them to someone who is actually qualified to provide trauma-informed treatment.
Okay. Absolutely. And in terms of, you did mention that the clinical trauma professional and the certified sex offender treatment provider as well.
Yes. I'm on Psychology Today Bernard Curry, and the phone number at the office also is 757-623-8985. We are accepting new referrals. As far as the referrals for people looking for sex offender treatment, I recently got 3 referrals this week, and 2 of them were for teenagers.
Really?
One young man accessed what was deemed inappropriate website in school on the Chromebook.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Wow. A lot to think about. Excuse me. And Ms. Adams, any other contact information that you'd like to give?
If anyone wants to stay updated on our services, if you need help, if you want to get involved, if you want to volunteer, intern, employment, anything like that, please, of course, visit our website. It is ywcashr.org. Again, that's ywca-shr.org.
Thank you so much. So our guests today have been Dr. Bernard Curry. He's a licensed clinical social worker, certified clinical trauma professional, and certified sex offender treatment provider. Dr. Curry, it's been a pleasure having you here today.
Pleasure's all mine. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. Oh, we have on the line Ms. Quayshawn Adams from the YWCA. She's in the marketing and public relations specialist. Ms. Adams, thank you again for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And earlier we had Miss Mary Taylor, a victim advocate for the Samaritan House. And of course, we've had you listening today. So don't forget, we are here every Friday from 5 to 7 p.m. We have fascinating guests, wonderful topics, passionate callers, and we have the rebroadcast every Sunday. That is 12 until 2. You can follow us on social media. That is Hot 91 Online. That's Hot 91 Online. If you have any topics that you're interested in hearing about, email me, bkadams@nsu.edu. bkadams@nsu.edu. And don't forget, we have our YouTube channel where you can hear these over and over again. It's been such a pleasure talking to you today. We'll see you next week. The views and opinions expressed on this program are not those of Norfolk State University or WNSB-FM. Thank you for listening.